the only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to the 612 Vikings podcast. I am Dustin with your co-host, Drew. Man, Drew, we got a major, huge Vikings win against the Green Bay Packers. How we feeling?
Feeling great. You came away with the big win, and now it guarantees an NFC North divisional clash, NFC clash, for the title and the NFC going into the playoffs. So, I did take a look at the schedule for Week 18. It says that none of the games are scheduled yet for time, so I would expect that this is going to be a Sunday Night Football game. So I'm definitely excited for it. Putting it on national television for everyone to see, and hopefully there'll be a Vikings win this time around because kind of got to get our little revenge game out. So plus we kind of need a little rest, so we could definitely.
Yeah, with what kind of sparked, I guess, this Sam Darnold legacy game, against the Green Bay Packers is when Keyshawn Nixon said before the game, it kind of bit him in the ass later, but he is like, "Oh yeah, this ain't gonna be a problem for us, it's Sam Darnold, whatever, blah blah blah." But Sam Darnold threw for 377 yards, 33-43, 3 touchdowns, one questionable interception, but really that didn't matter in the moment until later. But still, Sam Darnold cooked that Green Bay Packers defense, and honestly, I couldn't be any more stoked than what he's been doing, I guess, this whole year. I made a TikTok earlier today about, why there's no respect on Sam Darnold and why he's leading this team to 13 plus wins and now 14. And people just say, "Oh, it's the Vikings, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they just have Sam Darnold." Sam Darnold's playing good and great. I wouldn't mind, this can be another whole different video for another topic for another day, but I wouldn't mind re-signing Sam Darnold to another 1-year extension. Like, I would keep it at 1 year, but that's what I would do. But let's talk about today's game instead. Instead of looking into the future. Drew, what are your kind of key points into this game, kind of freshly getting off of this Vikings 27-25 win?
Yeah, I kind of want to go into that Keyshawn Nixon thing too. Is something I kind of found. I was really hyped for the game. Kind of was like, all right, I need to see some YouTube coverage, some ESPN coverage of the game, and kind of came across a reporter talk about Keyshawn Nixon. And then all of a sudden he's starting to talk smack about Darnold, saying, well, all you got to do is man him up, and then things will go your way. Well, if you watched the Green Bay game before, I think Justin Jefferson was in man coverage, and he basically mossed him for a touchdown. And later on in the game, Justin Jefferson had that one-handed grab on Keyshawn Nixon in man coverage. Ended up not counting a holding call, but the objective is still there. But going into Sam Darnold, he was 33 of 43, 377 yards. Which was good for 8.8 yards per attempt. He had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception with a 116.1 passer rating. So clearly the Packers need to do some more homework, because if that's your mindset come in, well, we just have to man them up. The Vikings are going to take advantage of that every single day. So it goes to show, the Packers have, it's been kind of going around. I don't think it's any secret that they've yet to really beat a team that's a really strong playoff team. I know they had the Rams, but it was without Nakua and Kupp, and I think maybe Kyron Williams might have been banged up in that too. But yeah, that was one thing that they had going in, and kind of the allegations going against them, and that doesn't look too good for Green Bay going into the last week of the season right before the playoffs. So furthermore, with the Packers, with the Sunday night game still pending of this recording, but with a Washington win this week puts Washington at the 6th seed, and the Vikings being possibly the 1 seed, and the Packers at 7. We could see them in the postseason. So I do want to kind of ask you about this, Dustin. What are your thoughts on potentially seeing Green Bay yet again for a 3rd time in the playoffs?
Sorry for the technical difficulties here. But to kind of view that, I did see a scenario where the Vikings could end up playing Packers and then the Lions and then Packers and Lions again. So that could be another scenario. But playing the Packers again, I would assume that's probably at our place if we hang on to that 1 seed, and things could get interesting. Today really felt like a playoff game, that just high intensity, good turnout of Vikings and Packer fans. I thought there'd be a couple more Packer fans than what people were projecting, but good amount of purple today. We just gotta go 1-0 every week, and the Lions game is up next. Time and date to be determined. Looks like it might be a Sunday night game, is what it's projecting to be, but we're gonna have to see. Playing a division opponent, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row in 1 year, and we'll have to see how that playoff performance comes out to be. And I don't know, I kind of like the Vikings' chances. If we stay at home, indoors, we got our home crowd, we got that home field advantage, and we've been, like, another thing too, we've been really healthy this whole year. We've lost Christian Darrisaw, and that's honestly really it for key pieces. So we've been really healthy. I like our chances going into the playoffs and any playoff game that we do play.
Yeah, for sure. I would also say this too. I think the last team to beat a team 3 times in the same season was the Niners against the Seahawks, and I believe that was the year that was Brock Purdy's rookie season, where they kind of went on their own Cinderella run. With Brock Purdy at the time was a Cinderella run. Made the NFC title game. Unfortunately, they did lose because of the Brock Purdy injury, and then they kind of had to just find a way to finish the game with McCaffrey at quarterback. But it was an unfortunate thing, but it is doable. The Seahawks had theirs. They had it, and I think they actually went to San Francisco. It was a little bit more of a challenge for San Francisco the third time, which I would expect this one to be if we had to play Green Bay again. But I welcome the challenge. I do think we could beat Green Bay a third time potentially if we do see them in the playoffs, if we are the 1 seed and they're a 7 potentially.
Yeah, and like, for scenario wise, there's a lot of different scenarios on who the Vikings could play, where they could end up in seeding. The Packers, I don't think, can really move much outside of being the 5th or 6th seed. But other than that, it's going to get real interesting for these NFC playoffs. I think they'll probably have the better of the conferences. AFC, you'll have your Chiefs, you'll have your Ravens, you have your Bills, okay, whatever. We've seen that the past couple of years. NFC is always changing it up every single year, and it's really fun. You got some really young, fun teams in there too. You got the Buccaneers, the Vikings, the Packers, the Lions. All those teams are all fun teams. You get the Falcons maybe in there, the Commanders, you get Jaden Daniels in there. It's going to be a really fun playoff scenario. And these last 2 weeks, or I guess last week really, is going to set up a lot of fun scenarios. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I do think too, with this Packer loss, it does eliminate them from getting the 5 seed. So the highest they could be is 6. Obviously, pending still that Sunday night game, as I mentioned earlier. Washington does have the tiebreaker over Green Bay. I believe it's because of divisional wins. I think that's why that Eagles win was so big for him, is because of that. You got that extra divisional win. So I don't think they play Philly again. I think they've already played them twice. So I think they'll either get Dallas or New York, one of those 2 teams for that Week 18 matchup, which they should win. So it kind of looks like that if Washington takes care of business against Atlanta tonight, that Green Bay is going to be that 7 seed potentially. Assuming that they beat the team that's ahead of them on Week 18. But yeah, there's right now we're just kind of looking at scenarios. If we get this, if we were able to win, if we don't. But yeah, this was a very big playoff implication game, and definitely was enjoyable for about maybe 58 minutes of it. But yeah, until they had that little, they had a little. I don't want to say it was garbage time, because I think that's kind of mean. Like they weren't going to go away without a fight, and I think it was the same story as we saw. What was it, week 3, week 4, when we played them at Lambeau, or the Vikings started off quick. Which was something that the Packers said they didn't want to let happen, and I think that's just been the big Achilles heel with Green Bay in this division. Is I think they do enough to keep these, they're good enough to keep it competitive, but I just think they're missing that key piece, whether that's on their offensive, defense of the ball. I just don't know if they have that, like, guy, like I would say like a Justin Jefferson, or like, the Chiefs have a Mahomes. Like, they have very good players. I just don't know if they have like that X factor superstar sort of player that can kind of bail them out of those big moments like a Justin Jefferson did. Like, he had that one ridiculous one-handed catch, or he had the big rip for 40 yards to extend the drive. But
I mean, they have Josh Jacobs, but he's just a running back. He can only do so much. He can't really stretch the field like a wide receiver or tight end can do. So they're
yeah.
really limited with that.
Yeah, and that was the weird thing too, because I know that they said they wanted to use Jacobs a little bit more. I think the last time they kind of went away from Jacobs because of the fact that Minnesota started off, what was it, like a 23-0 start or 27-0 start, whatever it was. He had like, I think 14, 15 carries by halftime. He only had like a carry or two in the second half, and Emmanuel Wilson actually got a good amount of carries in that second half when they wanted to run the ball. So I don't know if it was something kind of similar to Jones, or if they wanted to kind of put their running back on ice for that next week's game sort of thing. But that was something I noticed as well. He only had like a carry or two, didn't really do too much in the second half. So they kind of had to go away from their game plan, especially when the Vikings got to double dip for 10 points. After a 10-point lead, they went up and they got that touchdown to open up the second half, which ended up being 20-3. So it makes sense, but it's something that is very clear on what the Packers' identity is run the ball with Jacobs, and then, play action it with Love, throw on the run, then those magic plays could happen. But yeah, the Vikings defense is legit. They held the Packers to under looks like about 100 yards if I'm correct, or about 100 yards, which is still fine. It's doable, but yeah. If you want to go into that.
Just kind of going through like the team stats real quick, just for reference. For total yards, the Vikings led the Packers 441 to 271. Passing yards 372 to 167. Rushing yards, Green Bay did take the edge 104 to 69. And then yards per play, the Vikings kind of edged out the Packers with 6.3 yards per play opposed to 4.8. So just kind of for reference.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, when you're able to move the ball, and I think that's a big thing too. Like I said, when you have that guy that can make those explosive plays, like a Justin Jefferson, those superstar X factor kind of guys, those are what championship teams always have. Like there's never a team that has won a Super Bowl that hasn't had that. And you, not saying you can't win it without one. It doesn't have to be a quarterback, but there's always that one guy that is able to cover up a big hole, whether that's your offense or your defense, and can change a game. And that's something that Justin Jefferson does. I think Jordan Love might be the closest to that. Potentially Jaden Reed. I mean, those are all just really good players. I just don't know if they have anybody like on the level of a Justin Jefferson. Like I said, I mean, Jacobs, like you said, is a good running back. Is he a game changer running back? I think that still remains to be seen. I don't know if he is on the level of a Saquon or a healthy Christian McCaffrey or even a Derrick Henry for the most part. So, and it's something that they easily could find. It's one of those things where they'll have free agency. I think they backloaded Love's contract so they can get something there. There's also something too where you got the draft, and I think that just is the big thing with Green Bay, and I think that's a big reason why they've now, I think 4 losses now in the division, if I'm correct, because they've been swept by the Lions and the Vikings. So I think that puts them.
Lions, Vikings got swept, and then I think they are probably gonna sweep the Bears.
Yeah,
honestly.
and that's the thing too. Like the Packers are a block field goal away from being 0-5 in this monster NFC North division. So
crazy.
And that's crazy. I mean, this division is clearly it's the best that we've ever seen. And I think there was a graphic on Fox that said this is the highest like win total NFC matchup we've seen in NFL history, and that's just going to get broken a week later with the Lions matchup, assuming that they win. That's a 28 win combined win total between the two teams. So I mean, this is just a crazy year for the NFC North, and I don't think there's really much that we have left to say. It's one of those things where this is a 12-win Packer team might be a 7 seed. I mean, not even just the North; it's just the division of the whole conference. I mean, a 12-win team. If you have the Seahawks might be 10 wins and miss the playoffs. So, crazy year for sure.
Yeah, it's I haven't really been a fan of this, but if you're like an NFC North team, you have 13 plus wins, 12 plus wins, whatever it is, like the Packers have. You're gonna have all those wins, and A, not win the NFC North, and B, have all those wins and go play road playoff games and not have a home playoff game that whole stretch. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with that whole format, but at the same time, that's just how it is. I don't know how much you can and cannot change because you have 3, 11, 12 plus wins in the NFC North. You can't have everybody have a home game and all that in the playoffs. So it is what it is. Just kind of looking into this game, there's some cracks in both teams. The Packers defense isn't really what everybody kind of thought it was. I believe they only had maybe 1 or 2 sacks, if that. Let me take a look. I think they only had 1 sack.
Yeah.
One. So Green Bay had 3 sacks allowed. We only had 1. So that was kudos to our pass protection. Honestly, I thought we played really well. Sam Darnold could have taken a fat nap back there, honestly, and just I'm really proud of that pass protection. Run blocking really could use some work. I know you don't really have the best run blocking offensive line with Cam Robinson kind of being weaker. He's not a Christian Darrisaw, and then Dylan Reisner, he's not a great run blocker either. But it is what it is. You got to make do with what you have. Aaron Jones is a really good running back. He's going to make things work.
Yeah.
Cam Akers played really well. Speaking of Cam Akers too, that last catch that he had to move the chains, I think scared a lot of Vikings fans. If he did not catch that, you're punting that ball. You're giving Jordan Love another chance. And I love Cam Akers so much after that. He is our savior for this game. It's astonishing to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, he had the clutch catch, and he also had a big touchdown too that put the game up 3 possessions, and that touchdown ended up being the reason why they won. So Cam Akers is definitely a guy that deserves a big shout out. I think my personal shout out it's got to be Jalen Naylor, being a wide receiver 3. He had 5 catches, 81 yards, and then he had that big bomb of a touchdown to split. I think he split the safeties and then got open, and then they hit him at the back of the end zone there. So Naylor had a big game, and it's one of those things too. Naylor actually had a big touchdown, a long touchdown in 2022 when he was a rookie. So I know there's the running joke online that Jefferson is the father of Jair Alexander and Jordan Addison's the father of Jair Alexander, or Jefferson fathers the Packers or whatever it is, or that Jair's ducking. But a third guy, if you want to throw, if you are a person that likes to be a little joker on the internet, you could throw Jalen Naylor in there. He's had that big long touchdown a couple years ago as rookie season. Kind of was injured last year, but now that he's got the wide receiver 3 role, had a big game against them, and the second time around, get the 5 receptions, 81 yards, and a tutty. So that would say that was my personal shout out of the game, of a guy that really stepped up big, that performed better than expected, that we had going into the game.
Yeah, I know Jalen Naylor. I've always been kind of a fan of him. He's just got to stay healthy, and this year he's been pretty healthy. That Giants game is when it kind of all started. He had a couple of receptions in that, had that touchdown, a couple other games as well, and then today obviously showed off as well. 5 receptions, like you said, a touchdown, splitting the safety. I believe they were playing like cover 3 or something, so it was just a perfect flick of the wrist by Sam Darnold, and it's just really nice to see. Jefferson with 8 receptions, 92 yards. I kind of wish he got into the end zone, but just kind of a quiet game from Jefferson. Game that a lot of receivers wish they had, honestly. Jordan Addison having a good game too. But other than that, I was telling some of my friends off air too that the Vikings, before the game started, I thought they would have a dominant game, but it wouldn't show in the necessarily the scoreboard or the stat sheet. And that's exactly what they did. Sam Darnold had a great game, almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. It doesn't really show in a 27-25 victory, but the one pick kind of hurt them a little bit, or it allowed pretty much a touchdown. But at the same time, the Vikings pretty much dominated this game, and I think Kevin O'Connell, at least for my money, has to win that Coach of the Year. I think he's the front runner now. What do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, he's definitely Coach of the Year. I think this win definitely seals it. You can kiss that trophy goodbye. There were some guys who kind of got like an argument. I know Matt LaFleur is a guy who I feel like is kind of underrated for it. He's always in the conversation, but he's never there, like in the running for it at the end. But he is a good coach. I just don't know if it was coach of the year worthy just because he was a guy that had that expectation of, if anyone were to dethrone the preseason expectations, I should say, if anyone were to dethrone them, the odds were in favor of Green Bay doing so. And they could quietly win 12 games. So I mean, that's a guy who was in there. Dan Quinn out of Washington, doing what he's done with Jaden Daniels, going to the playoffs, and then obviously Dan Campbell. When you are potentially going 14-2 on Monday Night Football, pending that game, that's a guy I think is the only guy really left, maybe that has a conversation. Maybe Mike Tomlin, but with them losing a couple games, I think he's out of it. But this is the one that put the ribbon on it, and Kevin O'Connell will be coach of the year, just given the situations he's been in, the preseason expectations of 6.5 wins, that the over/under. Sam Darnold, basically the backup quarterback journey we've definitely have grown accustomed to. If you're a Vikings fan, since the '98 years, I would say Cunningham was, at that point of his career was a career backup. Case Keenum was a backup, and now we got Sam Darnold. So, I think he definitely deserves the coach of the year nod for sure.
Yeah, kind of going back to like the cast off quarterbacks that we've had. Like, it's so weird that we have these cast off quarterbacks that do really well. Like I believe it was like the '98 season. Culpepper for a little bit. He wasn't really a cast off, but Case Keenum,
Brett Favre.
Brett Favre was a little bit of that too. Almost making it to the Super Bowl, and then now Sam Darnold. It's just crazy what the Vikings can do. I think the Vikings are probably the best quarterback producing team in the
QB doctor.
Yeah, the QB doctor pretty much. So you look at Sam Darnold and Case Keenum throughout history. So they just got to get it done one of these years. They just got to get it done, win that damn Super Bowl, and you can just call it done. I mean, you win that Super Bowl, you finally fulfill all the fans. It's lifted off your chest and all that. So, and that's the goal this year, kind of exceeding expectations.
Yeah.
And so in another episode, we're going to talk about Sam Darnold and his future with the Minnesota Vikings. I kind of made a episode about that too, but it's more and more of a possibility with JJ McCarthy kind of sitting behind the bench or on the bench and just kind of learning from Sammy D. And I'm not necessarily opposed of that. Honestly, you give him another year to learn and heal from that injury.
Yeah. It's something that we'll kind of cross that bridge when it kind of happens. But, I think just the biggest fear for a Viking fan is you don't want to be locked into a contract and then Sam Darnold kind of goes back to his old ways, kind of similar like what the Giants had with Daniel Jones. He had that great season, got the big extension for many years, and then things kind of unraveled, and then he ends up getting released, I think, in year 2 of his deal. So now he's on the Vikings, the QB doctor. So, I think that's just the biggest fear for Viking fans, I would say. But, like I said, it's one of those things. I think they have a plan, and, they had, Kwesi's a very smart guy, a Princeton grad, analytics nerd. So he's calculated every single move on, okay, well, if this happens, then what do we do if this happens and then this happens? So everything's very much calculated. And there has been leaks, something about, that they're still going to roll with JJ. And I mean, let's not forget, JJ was a guy that looked like he was going to be the starting quarterback week 1 that almost beat out Sam Darnold. So with the season that Darnold's having, I mean, who knows what McCarthy could be. But given this coaching staff, I and the admins and at the Vikings organization, I got a lot of faith that they'll make the right call on this. I think it's very similar to the 2017 season where, you had Case, you had Teddy, Sam, and Kirk on the market because that was pretty much his team that he wanted to go to. So you had your choice of quarterbacks. And then I think we're kind of in that boat again. Some Viking fans might disagree. I still think we made the right call, just given how short Bradford went out of the league afterwards. Bridgewater really was nothing much afterwards, and Case Keenum was pretty much out of the league and back up by then. So, if you're talking about the quarterback stability aspect of it, they made the right call. So, but it's one of those things we'll focus on that in the future. But right now, it's taking it one game at a time, like you said, 1-0 each week, and look forward to the playoffs, and hopefully we can get the number 1 seed next week in the matchup against Detroit.
Yeah, before we head off here, is there any Anything from today's game that kind of, I guess, worries you, or anything that you thought the Vikings did really well? Just kind of on both sides of those spectrums. What kind of what are your thoughts on both sides of that?
Yeah, I think if you're not really a Vikings fan, if you're not worried about every single possible scenario going against you, so
Yeah.
some worries I think I would say is I think we were a little bit pass heavy at the end. I think we kind of took our foot off the gas a little bit after that Cam
Mhm.
Akers touchdown. We were kind of like, oh, what's a 3 possession game? We kind of got this in the bag. It's fourth quarter. I kind of want to see a little bit more consistency there. I think with you throwing the ball so much, it uh, it kind of allows you to get back in the game because I want to say it was around the 6 minute mark. We kind of I think that was when the Jefferson catch happened.
Yep.
Things kind of unraveled and we ended up throwing it. And I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it, but sometimes the conservative approach is the best approach when it's 3rd and 15. Sometimes it's just best to go take a draw, take an inside zone run, or whatever you need to do. Just run the
Bleed
ball,
some
take
clock.
up 40 seconds off the clock,
Yep.
and that eats up more time because I had we ran that ball earlier, you know, that we would have had the 2 minute warning that would have happened when we had the ball would have happened when Green Bay would have had the ball, which means they would have had to take at least another timeout or two. So,
Mhm.
and that's another 40 seconds off the clock there. So, that's just one thing I kind of want to see change. It's one of those things I appreciate the aggressiveness from time to time. It worked out in our favor in the end with being aggressive by throwing the ball on that 2 minute drive, but sometimes it can come back to it's kind of like Dan Campbell going for it on fourth down all the time. If you're going to live and die by it, it's fine, but just
Yep.
know when the right time is the right time to do it. And I think that's the biggest thing I would say is pick and choose your moments and don't try to force the moments to happen. And I think that's just one thing that if I have to say one thing I'd like to see a little bit different is just try not to force things as much and try to make your own magic happen that way. Just kind of let the game come to you a little bit more. But I'll give it to you on whatever you want to finish off with.
Yeah, I mean, I thought today's game was pretty much good overall. I mean, clock management by KOC, I think there's definitely some things to work on for sure. The delay of game, some other things too. It's just has to be cleaned up if you're gonna play a team like Detroit. You got to clean that stuff up. If you're in the playoffs, you got to clean that stuff up and just kind of go from there. But I was gonna ask you too. What did you think of KOC's play calling today too? I thought that was kind of hit and miss. I think that was more. I don't know. I kind of liked it more than I didn't like it. Um, Sam Darnold was a surgeon. I thought play calling was pretty good. I think it passed the eye test for me.
Yeah, I don't think play calling is really the big issue for me. I think if you want to say, I guess, play calling issue that I would have is that fourth quarter management. When it
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt like Green Bay was kind of storming back a little bit after that. I think what it was after that interception, the momentum was on Green Bay's side. And I think
Yeah,
it's one of those things where you kind of have to read the room and say, okay, well, now that they have the momentum, let's try to make it harder for them to make that comeback. And I think that's the only gripe I've really got with play calling. But like earlier in the
sure.
game, the toss plays and running it up and whatever they're doing, throwing the ball. I never really had a big issue with play calling this year. I think it's just mostly been, like I said, the only gripe I really had was the fourth quarter clock management. I think the other three
Sure.
quarters were just fine and making plays happen. And, like you said, Sam Darnold was throwing the ball well and Aaron Jones was running the ball well. I think it was 5 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think he ended up being 5 yards a carry before he ended up sitting out, and then he ended up being at like just shy of 4. So I
Yep.
think that's the only thing I really got. So, but yeah, I've never really had
Okay.
an issue on.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I pretty much agree with all that too. And yeah, well, we'll see what happens next week against Detroit Lions in Detroit on the road. It's gonna be a fun one. Kevin O'Connell is gonna have to be in his bag and see what play calling he can call up, I guess. And uh, hopefully Sam Darnold continues his consistency and playing well. And I think he could probably go for probably close to 300 yards again against that depleted Lions defense. So Drew, before we sign off, is there any other points you want to bring up about this Vikings Packer game or anything in the future?
Just get the number 1 seed, force Detroit to go on the road and with the depleted team that, like you said earlier, they got a big injury report right now coming in, force them to go on the road and hopefully make them one and done. And hopefully it's against Tampa. I don't really think Atlanta could beat them, but Tampa was a team that Tampa is the team that beat them earlier in the year on the road. Now this year they got to go at home, and like I said, the injury report's a mile long, so maybe that can ease a little divisional tension in the postseason for the Vikings a little bit, and then obviously we'll see what Green Bay does. But these just excited for the playoffs, and it's one of those things where I'm expecting the worst, but I'm also expecting the best, and it's the is this finally the year that we do it kind of feeling. So
when was the last time the Vikings were the first seed?
1998.
98, that's what I thought. Okay, well, it's been a quarter century here, so
we're due. We have not been alive for it, so we want to see the 1 seed for the first time. So but
in our lifetime, please.
But I do want to say on one note, mathematically the Eagles are now eliminated from the 1 seed with this Vikings win, so it will either be Detroit or Minnesota. So the path for Philly, if you were curious, was Packers had to win, and then the Lions had to lose on Monday Night Football, and then they needed the Vikings to beat Detroit next week for them to have the 1 seed. So now they are mathematically eliminated from the 1 seed. It'll either be the Detroit Lions or the Minnesota Vikings with the 1 seed. So it'll definitely be exciting times. Hopefully, probably on
Grab
Sunday.
Your popcorn.
Yep, get your popcorn ready. Cam Bynum said it. It's going to be a movie. So
it is movie. All right. Well, with that said, thank you guys for listening to this podcast. Make sure you guys leave a like. Go follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, 612 Vikings. And hopefully the Vikings get that first seed. I don't want to look too far ahead. Enjoy this win tonight, tomorrow, the next 24 hours. But after that, it is on to Detroit, the Motor City Kitties. So with that said, I'll leave it at that. What's that?
The Detroit Cryans.
Yeah, the Detroit Cryans. So with that said, we'll see you guys in the next episode. And hopefully we get to a little closer to the first seed. Root for the 49ers Monday night. Got that? Let's go. Skull Vikes.